Well, hi, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is Take 5 with Steven Travers, and Steven joins us as he always does this week. But, Steven, today we've got a guest. We've got the dude, Mike McDowd, with us, and he's going to talk a little bit about sports, about stuff that is not related to sports. We're going to talk about his wonderful hair and how it's been just growing like a weed and about paying rent, right, Steven? A few things like that.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the check in the mail, dude.
I'm writing it right now. I'm actually
sure you are.
And by the way, guys, before I know this is your show, but I have a great idea for you. I just figured this out when I was in the bathroom, and I said to myself, I believe I have a new direction for this show, 100 Yards of Football. This would be so great for PBS Sports. 100 Yards of Football on PBS with Harper Lebel, and Steven Travers, because it's such a can't you guys see yourselves doing a show on the great PBS network around America? I mean, it's just so fitting for a show like 100 Yards of Football.
Well, first of all, you're expressing way too much emotion to do it on that network, right?
Perfect.
You got to tone it down even further in order to do that. But here it's Georgia Public Broadcasting, so GPB. It's not even PBS. So I don't know where my tax money is going, but it's going to Jim Nantz talking about the 14th greens, right? It's Augusta.
Okay, man. I'm sorry, guys, but Jim Nantz, he's a legend, right? But I call him Mr. Vanilla. I find him so boring. Welcome to CBS. Hello, friends. I'm sorry. I know he's a legend. I know he's been around forever, but is that guy not vanilla or what? Is it just me?
Okay, so here's my thing. You put Pat Summerall, who'd only say about 10 words. Montana, Rice, touchdown. That's all he said. And then you put John Madden with him, who's booming and going all over the place. And it was a recipe made in heaven in terms of the ratings and everything like that. They worked well together. Romo, in my opinion, and this is just mine, remember his last year that he was in the league, he got hurt. He got a back injury. Someone kind of speared him in the back and he missed 7, 8, 9 games. He had a headset on during that entire time, and he's listening to the coaches. And the coaches are saying, watch the blitz. Hey, what? And he's telling rookie Dak Prescott what to do. And then the mic cuts off, but the coaches are still talking. And Romo's hearing that. Here comes the safety. Watch for this. They got to go to the other side. And I think Romo became a better quarterback and absolutely a better announcer because he got to hear the way that the coaches were talking in a manner that he didn't get to hear while he was playing. He didn't want to hear all that chatter. But then he gets, hey, Jim, here comes a blitz. Watch out. They're going to go to the other side. And he looks like he's Nostradamus, and he can predict every play because he's reading the defenses in a different manner. I think that was an advantageous part. And what did Jim Nantz do? Just get out of the way. Let Tony talk.
Yeah. You know, you just mentioned Pat Summerall. I think you guys will get a kick out of this. Listen to this. On Tuesday, I had a compelling conversation with his son, Greg Summerall. He is a producer, writer for Spectrum Films here in Jacksonville. I was in his office. We had a great conversation, talked a little about his dad. You know, his dad actually lived down the road from me in Ponte Vedra because at the end of his life, as you may well know, he had a liver transplant and he had it done down the street at Mayo Clinic Hospital. So anyways, there's my connection to Pat Summerall. But on my show, I'm gonna have, and Pat Summerall's kids should have him on your show too. I mean, talk about a fascinating life and a wonderful film producer. This guy's top shelf.
No kidding. Wow. Well, Pat obviously goes back to the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. He was a kicker and a receiver for the Giants, wore number 88, and had a magnificent career. And then, just was the butter, really, for CBS Sports. Lindsey Nelson, and I'm missing a couple others. I know Bill Simpson, Charlie Jones. Who are some of the other greats that were part? Lindsey, I mentioned Lindsey.
Kurt Gowdy.
Oh, absolutely. How amazing was he?
Yeah.
From Wyoming, nonetheless, a small town in Wyoming. Steven, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, it wasn't Bill Simpson. It was Dick Simpson.
Are we sure?
Huh?
Are we sure about that?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Steve,
I'm almost sure it wasn't Bill, but I remember he was. There were voices of my childhood, that you heard them and you knew it was a big game. Gowdy,
Yep.
Summerall, Simpson, and later on there were other people. And when you heard them, you knew it was a big game. Bob Costas comes to mind. Certainly, Vin Scully comes to mind.
Yeah, and people may not remember that Vin Scully, by the way, he called the catch in San Francisco. He was doing that game nationally. He worked with Madden for a short amount of time, but Vin Scully did NFL games for quite a while when the baseball season was over.
Sure. Well, he got his start doing football. He got his break because of football. He sent Red Barber, who was the Dodger announcer, also did football, and Barber had a weekend, a 3-game weekend, where somehow he was going to do 3 games, like a doubleheader, and then he was going to do a night game somehow, and I don't think he could find anybody else who could handle the schedule. Yeah, Jim Simpson. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah, appreciate it greatly.
Beautiful. I knew it wasn't Bill. Anyway, and Scully had sent a tape to Barber. Barber was impressed, and he said, "Well, can you handle a 3-game weekend? It's going to be, like Brown is going to play Penn, and then I don't know, Dartmouth is going to play Boston College, something like that." And Scully said yes. So Scully and Barber got started doing this 3-game weekend football. And of course, Barber was very impressed with Scully, as you can imagine, and brought him on as the Dodger announcer, which was wonderful for Scully, who grew up in New York. It was his hometown team. That was 1950. So it was football that brought Scully into the announcing sphere as a professional.
And he was very good, the way I remember. Didn't let the game get, too big. Al Michaels has one of the great moments of all time when Do You Believe in Miracles? Al's called numerous other great games. But Vinny just let things happen, so to speak. And he was such a slow deliverer that it was, it was perfect for television because he didn't have to say a whole heck of a lot. You could see what he was seeing, so you didn't have to fill in gaps and talk about where the location of the pitch was or what a great block it was. He let the other guys that worked with him do all that. But
I want to say this about our man, the McDude. I've done a lot of play-by-play with Mike. We've done basketball, we've done football, and we've done baseball together. Probably Mike and I have been in the booth on 20 different occasions. Some of it was high school, some of it was junior college, some of it was semi-pro baseball. And Mike is an outstanding play-by-play man in any sport, and he handles football and basketball, which are difficult sports. I was the color guy, and it would get past me, and I would be like, it's into the big man under the boards, but he was like, he knew, Smith gets it out to Jones. Jones gets it out to Papadakis. Lebel under the boards up with a big one. Yeah. And he'd do his research and he remembered the names and he was excellent play-by-play man.
I'm glad I got the ball from Papadakis because I'm not giving it back to that guy. I'm going to score. All right. I'm a vacuum.
We already know that story. Yeah.
What's the secret for you, if there is one, or is there like a little magic moment or a recipe that you put together in terms of how you want the game to sound to the listener? Are you cognizant of the way that you're announcing the game, Mike? Is that something that you pay close attention to?
Yes, and I want to answer that question, but I must address something super quickly. We talked about Pat Summerall, and I know Steve will know this. Steve, you know who Pat Summerall and Harper, do you know who his daughter is by any chance?
No.
She works for the Trump administration, Susie Wiles. Are you familiar with her?
Oh, yeah. She's the chief of staff.
Yeah, that's his daughter.
That's his daughter. Oh, I did not.
Isn't that something else?
Interesting.
So Pat has some really good loins, is what you're telling me. He's got some kids that have grown up and they're movers and shakers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and to address your question, Harper, one of the keys, and Steve will attest to this, and I'm a stickler for this, is I'm extremely cognizant and prepared for these games. I will not do a game unless I know what the heck I'm talking about. I have to know names. I have to know background. I have to get in there, and I do I do more study than I most people will ever realize. Even when I did a UNF, University of North Florida soccer matches, I was the only guy in the history, the coaches told me this, that would spend an hour on the phone getting all the background, all the details, and preparing, understanding the different tactics that would take place during a game. Well, that applies to any sport, whether it's baseball, whether it's football, whether it's basketball. So, am I cognizant? Yes, because I've always believed in the old adage, when you are especially if you're doing radio, that you paint the picture, you describe the color of the grass, you describe the 50-yard line, what's on there, is there a lion, is there a tiger, is there a logo, all the colors, the sights, the sound, as if,
Scientists have discovered a strong post-dinner salt
I
ritual.
know you guys have heard this, but
for hours without losing
as if you're talking to us. I think you bring some radio into television. I mean, television is so much easier than radio. It's not even funny.
Yeah, well, I can verify that Mike does his prep work because I've seen him do it on numerous occasions, and it didn't matter the level of the game. He's a true professional.
It's interesting you say that. As a color guy, and that's basically all I've ever been in the booth. I just don't get it. My brain doesn't work in a play-by-play atmosphere. It works great in the color atmosphere. You say something, I react to it. Or you say A, and then I'll say B. You talk about the offense, and I'm going to say why the defense messed up or something, to kind of keep the fluidity going, but just paint a different portion of the picture of what you're doing from a radio perspective. I love doing prep work, don't get me wrong, but if I overdo it, I end up catching myself going, I'll never in a million years be able to express all that I've just taken in right now. That's more of what the play-by-play guy can do. I've only got a certain allotment, and Steven, you'll know this too, is you've only got you've got, unless there's a guy down on the ground, the ball is put down, and I'm talking about football, the ball's given to the referee, there's 40 seconds. If Mike isn't done talking, I got to wait for him, and then I'll go, hey, by the way, great outside run. He made a nice little move, and he steps out of bounds after gaining 5 yards. Good pickup on that one. And then I got to give it back to him because he's got to do the reset for the next down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The play-by-play man sets the tone, whether it's Scully. And speaking of prep work, I can remember being at the Dodger Stadium press box, and you'd see Vince Scully, the ultimate professional who knows everything, has forgotten more than anybody else ever knew.
Yep.
And he's doing an hour's worth of solid prep work before a Dodger game in August when the team is 8 games out. A complete professional. But getting back to it, yes, the play-by-play man is the coach, and he runs the show, and he's going to give you the cues, and you're going to follow that, and you're not going to overdo it because you don't want to step on his play-by-play.
Yeah, and to answer that further, extrapolate that question or that answer, it's a play-by-play man's job to really set up the color announcer and make him look as good as possible. So, the way I phrase questions, often I don't have time for questions. Steve will just take over, or you'll take over, Harper, after a play. But so often in a broadcast, you can set up questions where that your color guy is going to be able to give you a great answer or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyways, just an additional thought.
What was your international symbol to shut up? Dave Cohen always, he'll do this, like tighten it up, and he's got his pace and certain things like that. Were there any nonverbal cues that you would give to Steve so that he'd give you the mic back?
Not. I think, hey, something like that. Of course, a lot of times there are times when something's going on and I have to do something, and I'll be like, Steve, stretch.
Yep.
And so a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, Mike and I knew.
I remember a lot of that more than anything else. I mean,
And,
Steve,
yeah, we just know each other so well. I don't even think we need any cues. We could just read off each other or finish each other's sentences. But there was an event that occurred. Mike, you'll remember this. Mike was the play-by-play man for a collegiate summer league baseball team called
that's right.
Fieldsville Prune Pickers.
No way.
The Healdsburg Prune Packers.
Prune Packers. Okay.
Prune Packers. Okay, much better than the Prune Pickers.
Yeah, and they
weren't the Fudge Packers.
Country,
they weren't the Fudge Packers, but the Prune
Packers. They were not.
Okay, Mike. So we went up there, and it was a nice little really a sweet little ballpark with a very short right field porch. And these were college players. Some of them played at Cal. Some of them were junior college players. And Mike was the play-by-play guy. It was it gets to the end of the game, and Healdsburg was leading 2-1, and they bring in a closer. This kid, you remember him, Mike?
Yeah.
Do you remember his name by any chance?
Oh man, he played. I know his story. He was a tight end at Santa Rosa Junior College. Really good tight end too. Tall, he's about 6'6", Harper, maybe 6'7". Tall kid, got no love. Wanted to play D1 football, so he got some love playing baseball, and he played at the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco, which is the only art institute that plays sports in America. It's a Division II school, and he was pitching Steve, 80s, low 80s. He was working with his pitching coach through the years. All of a sudden, his speed started jumping up to 88, 89. He was approaching 90. He kept working with a coach, and then he played he gave up baseball, and Healdsburg asked him to come play. When it was all said and done, after working through with a pitching coach, his intense training, Steve and I saw a guy that threw, and Steve and I can attest to this. He was clocked at 100 miles per hour, 101 at one point.
Yeah, I remember, and I said to Mike, Mike, I've seen a lot of baseball, and that kid's throwing in the high 90s. And luckily, there was the general manager of the team was just below us, and he had a radar gun going. And I just called down, "What's it going?" And he started calling him, "That's 98, that's 99." And anyway, he finished the game with closed the game out. We got the story on the kid, and I just sent out some emails to some of my contacts, Billy Bean and Bobby Evans of the Giants, and maybe planted a little piece in John Shea's article in the San Francisco Chronicle. Right, and he ended up signing. This was a kid who really wasn't even a baseball player or a pitcher, but had just sort of come out of nowhere. He played a year or two in the low minors and didn't really go anywhere. I think he had some. I don't know. I don't think he had a breaking ball. And I'm not sure that he needed one, but that was what I heard. I don't know, but I kind of was responsible. Mike and I were kind of responsible for getting him signed eventually by the Minnesota Twins, because he was definitely a guy that we just discovered watching.
Steve, at that last game, if you recall, there were 12 major league scouts at that game, and the Yankees were there, the Braves were there, the Twins were there. Other teams, but it was exciting for him. It was exciting for the ball club. It's a great collegiate baseball program in California. I mean, one of the best around the country. Since Steven and I left, and that's about 10 years ago now, they get, Steve, I don't know if you know this, but they get the best blue chip baseball players in the country, from all over. I'm talking Texas, LSU, UCLA, USC, Cal, Notre Dame, whatever. They flock to this guy because it's you might remember this name, but the manager there was Joey Gomes. His brother was what's his brother's name?
Johnny Gomes.
Johnny, who played for the Red Sox, the A's.
Yeah, played for the big leagues. They were local guys from Petaluma, not far from Healdsburg.
Johnny was a great player, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a great ball player. He was a good manager. They ran a top-notch program. Now, I was unaware. Maybe you're referring to a later game because I don't remember scouts being there that day.
Oh yeah, okay. At a later
I
game,
think later,
definitely.
later after maybe I had, put the word out to Billy Bean and Bob Evans and whoever else I contacted. Maybe that's how the scouts go. Or maybe, Johnny Gomes probably got some people there. I can't take credit for it, but I definitely felt like we discovered this kid. I'd never seen him before. And it was one of those, natural moments, when you're looking at, holy cow, you're watching a baseball game and there's a kid throwing almost 100 miles an hour. So that was really amazing.
And kudos to producer Logan Landers, always does such a great job for you guys as he shows a picture of the tattooed Mr. Gomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a Red Sox because he's got a full beard. That wouldn't happen if you were on the Yankees.
That's true. Well, what do you guys want to talk about? WNBA?
No, while we're on the subject, name a favorite either announcer. We've talked about a few, but is there another one that we're missing that you guys say, man, that was TV gold for me? I would sit on the couch and I would watch games differently because of name the name. Is there anyone in particular as a young kid or even now that really impresses you when they get behind the mic and they're in a booth? We mentioned Jim, and thank you. It was Wade Turner that gave us that correction. We needed the editing. It was Jim Simpson. I had mentioned Charlie Jones, Lindsey Nelson being one. You had mentioned Kurt Gowdy. Some of these names from the past, and because there were only 3 stations back in those days, there weren't the same amount. A very young Keith Jackson, who, by the way, if you need any trivia question, say who was in the booth during the very first Monday Night Football game, and it was Keith Jackson who was in the booth. Howard and Frank and Dandy Don were the second year of the programming, and they were on for quite a while. But let me ask you first, Mike. Give me another name or two that I'm missing from the wonderful past of the McDowd memories.
Well, I mean, pass. The guy who stands out, who I think is terrific, whether he's yesterday or today, is Kevin Harlan. Kevin Harlan is absolutely fantastic, and he just did the NBA All-Star. He does stuff for CBS, NFL. Kevin Harlan is as good as it gets. I mean, his voice, his delivery, his enthusiasm. Today he's number one as far as I'm concerned, and yet TBS did not have him do the All-Star play-by-play. They had some guy named I'll just say it, Greg Anderson. I never heard of him. I mean, Steve and I have talked about this, and I'll answer that question more closely. But some of the announcers today, they sound like children. Steve and I have had this conversation many times. We're like, wow. All I can say, many guys on ESPN and Steve and I will sit there and watch a game. This guy sounds like a child. So that's my little nitpicking. I'm sure you guys have heard the same, but there's so many great announcers. I will say this, and I'm sure maybe both of you have heard of this gentleman. I don't know if you guys remember the great Jerry Coleman. Do you remember him?
Sure.
He was the voice of the San Diego Padres.
Fighter pilot with Ted Williams.
United States Marine fighter pilot. Let me tell you, he was as good as anybody, but he was strictly working in the San Diego market. I'll recall when I first started out in broadcasting, somebody put me in touch with him, and I called him. We had a conversation. He said, he was as nice as could be. He said, send me back then a cassette tape. I sent him my tape. I don't know, maybe a couple months later, I reached out to him again, and Mr. Jerry Coleman ended up spending a good hour on the phone talking about. I asked him what he thought about my stuff. He said, you sound good, continue to grow. He gave me advice and was about the kind I mean, this guy's a fabulous player for the Yankees and a Marine fighter pilot hero. And this guy, and he's a big name in Major League Baseball. And Jerry Goldman spends time, an hour with me. I'm a nobody. So, I mean, to me, those are my number one play-by-play guys, those types of guys. There's so many great play-by-play people that just never, they're in the local markets. Bob Uecker was great. I love Bob Uecker. How could you not love Bob Uecker?
He's absolutely fantastic.
Steve, what was it? Was it Ernie Harwell, the great Detroit Tigers play-by-play guy?
Love.
Was there anybody? Yeah. Was there anybody better than him?
Ernie Harwell. I had a publisher, Triumph Books, a big publishing house owned by Random House, located in Chicago, and my go-to guy was a guy named Tom Bast. Did 7 books with these guys, and if you would call Tom and you would get his answering machine, he had managed to get Ernie Harwell to be his voice on his answering machine, and it went, if you're looking for Tom Bast, he's long gone, but leave a message at the tone, And I remember Ernie, just as an aside, talking to Bob Costas. He was about 90. He had cancer and he had a few months to live. And he had zero fear of death. He said, I'm going to the Lord. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I'm going to see friends and relatives and loved ones. I mean, a smile on his face, just take me. I mean, so that was, but and you met, the people we like are usually people that we have some association with or some soft spot in our heart. So for me, that's Bill King. And Bill King was strictly a radio guy and a play-by-play man for the Oakland Raiders. If you go way back in his history, he started off with the University of California football and basketball teams. He did the Cal's national champion basketball team of 1960. Later, Al Davis hired him for the Raiders. Then, he also did the San Francisco Giants for a year or two, very early on, I think when they were at Seal Stadium. Then the Raiders, and then also the Oakland A's. He was just simply magnificent and painted a portrait of a game that was even Vince Scully is not quite at the level of Bill King, with the Raiders. And of course he had a lot to work with the team rallying in the last 2 minutes of these magnificent games. But personally, in 1982, I'll make this story quick. I'm a minor league player in the low minor leagues with the Oakland A's. We're in spring training, and I'm going to the minor league camp every day, which was basically the Arizona State junior varsity field. And one day I see my name listed to pitch innings 4 through 6 in a major league spring training exhibition game against the San Francisco Giants. I'm like, holy cow! And Bill King announced that game, and I pitched 3 scoreless innings. And my dad listened to it back in the Bay Area, and I don't know. I mean, I wasn't a press guide or anything like that. I mean, I don't know. He did his research on me, and he knew who I was. And he said, here comes Steve Travers. He pitched for Al Endress in the glory days of Redwood a few years ago, and he knew me and knew my stats and my, and he was the guy who announced my 3 innings in the major league. So I got to go with Bill King.
Yeah, that's a fan favorite, and it leads me to, you've got the local guys, the Vin Scully, Dick Enberg did the Angels for years. Harry Carey and the Cubs are inseparable. Atlanta's had their own family, if you will, of announcers that have taken over, and the Careys have been amazing to fill spots here. I think you have a certain, because especially in college football, it's us, it's we, you know, we're going against Alabama today. You know what I mean? And there's
True.
an independence that you can have where you're just it's me and my guys are listening to us, or the ladies that are a part of our school or our program, versus when Vin Scully goes to a national game, he has to be as neutral as Switzerland. He can't homer with the Dodgers anymore. He can't tell the Sandy Koufax stories like he does when he's doing a Dodgers and a Reds game from Riverfront. So there's a little liberty. And I guess, Mike, you know this, there's certain times where you get to be a homer, and there are other times where you got to be anything but. You got to be neutral.
You got to be neutral. Listen, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I know you guys are going to be able to comment on this, but, and I don't quote me this exactly, but Bill King describing John Madden. Man, he can't believe it's real. It is real. Get your big butt over here.
Yeah. He was getting.
That's one of the greatest lines in sports I've ever heard. Yeah. I know you guys should talk about. Steve. And then a guy that I knew, and he worked with my father at KGO Radio in San Francisco, and God bless him. He was the voice of the University of California Golden Bears for almost 50 years. He was a play-by-play voice for the 49ers. The great Joe Starkey. And he had some great calls. He was a blessed man. But obviously, the call that's going to stay with him for the rest of his life and hopefully onward is, the band is on the field. The Bears, they've scored. I can't believe this. Oh my God. It was one of the most iconic calls in the history of college football. The Stanford band goes on the field and Cal runs through they get a big, what do you call it? Wall to protect them. And they finally get in there and Starkey goes nuts. I don't know if we could play audio on this show, but to pull up that call when Joe Starkey just goes ballistic, but it's a true emotional call. It's authentic. It's not manufactured, and it's one of the best calls you're ever going to hear. And Steve can talk about that. Harper, you probably know well.
Well, yeah, a friend of mine was actually on the field. My quarterback in high school went to Stanford. He didn't get to play much because they had some guy named Elwood. Yeah, something. But my friend Steve Cottrell was the holder for the field goal that went. It put Stanford ahead by what was it, 2 or 3 points, whatever it was, there to secure the lead. But his voice cracks, doesn't it? There either at one point or another, and that to me, I love stuff like that. There are certain people that frown on that. I think it's great because it adds to the authenticity of I can't believe what's going on out here.
Something like the Bears have won. The Bears have won. The greatest, most dramatic. Like that. It was one of those things, but it's one of those things that'll stick with you forever. Hey, one other great announcer, and I want to get your thoughts on this one. Do you remember Chris Schenkel when he used to do those bowling matches and all that stuff?
Oh.
Man, do you remember the commercial he used to do for beer? It tastes better in glass. Do you remember? Do you guys remember that at all?
I don't remember that specific, but Chris, he was a guy that would wear a sweater that had go all the way up to your chin and wear a neck, and then a sport coat that had no rhyme or reason to match that. Not as bad as Lindsey Nelson, but Chris was a smooth talker, man. He got to do his work for years, well past. I don't know who volunteers for the Pro Bowlers tour, but Earl Weaver was certainly a household name because of Chris Schenkel.
Well, Chris Schenkel got tongue-tied only one time, and it was 1972. It was USC was playing Stanford, and the Stanford band took the field, and Schenkel goes, and here's the Stanford band, and they're doing a tribute Chairman Mao. The world's greatest, the greatest murderer in the history of the world.
Oh yeah.
Responsible for 70 million deaths in communist China, and Stanford was doing. But you mentioned Starkey, and I met Joe Starkey, and I know you know him, Mike. My only complaint with Starkey, and I love the emotion. Ken Korak of the A's, who's a friend of mine, he allows himself to get like that only when it's appropriate, which is like a grand slam in the ninth inning to win the game, or like the A's have just won the 20th straight game. He's a very professional guy. My only issue with Starkey, and this coming from my position with the USC Trojans, because I've heard Starkey announce numerous Cal games versus USC on the radio. And he's the other side. So there's the other side of being a homer. I don't mind a homer. I don't mind if you're obviously a Cal fan, but he let his disdain for the Trojans, and I don't even think it was disdain. It was more jealousy for the Trojans. Oh, they're playing tribute to Troy again. That's why don't you stop them from scoring, and they won't beat you 55-7 and have to play that song every time they score. So, it's like the pitcher who's throwing. I never threw at hitters after they hit me. They were good enough to hit me. I'm not going to throw at a guy and bean him just because he beat me. My job is to be better than that. So he'd have these snide remarks about USC and the money.
True.
There's a very spoiled children, and then the Cal fans would wave credit cards. It's like, well, wait a minute, you have a credit card to wave, and you're waving a credit card as if there's something wrong with having a credit card, and that kind of thing always rubbed me the wrong way. But he was a good announcer, and I know I certainly enjoyed his work.
Well, as you well know, I mean, there's no love lost between Cal and USC, particularly from the Cal perspective, because they don't like USC. Quite frankly, I don't know how much USC likes Cal. I don't know if there's that bitter rivalry, but I would say it's fair to say there's more. The Cal USC, at least from the Cal side, that's much more of a rivalry, even as far as hatred or dislike, than Stanford is to a degree. Agree, disagree?
I would agree. At least at one point there was, then over the years,
now it's a joke.
Over the years, Cal is kind of, I don't want to say caught up. I mean, they hardly ever beat USC, even when USC wasn't particularly good. But I mean, they just, that whole. I mean, if you're getting back to that rivalry, that goes back to an event I believe it was 1959, and USC had a lineman who was known as, he and his brother were twins, and they were known as the God, they had a name. They had gone to Mount Carmel High in Los Angeles. They were known as the Twin Terrors of Mount Carmel, I believe they were called. One of them died in a car crash. The other played in the pros for the Rams. I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but they were all Americans. And there was a play where one of them hit a Cal guy, and he went out of bounds, and he was injured. And Cal ended up suing USC, over this play. Like, in fact, the guy who was injured, he later became the mayor of Berkeley, and it just became a political. And you're suing another football team for a hit or a late hit. I don't even think it was that much of a late hit. I think when they went back and looked at it, they saw that he was still in bounds when they hit him. But that caused a lot of enmity, because what had happened, if you want to get into this subject, is that Cal was a great all-around athletic program. They were national champions in baseball in 1947 and 57. They were national champions in football in 1960. My dad was part of their national championship football team of 1937. They went to the Rose Bowl 3 straight years in the late 40s with Jackie Jensen. They were a great program. in 55, 56, there was a scandal in the NCAA where many teams, Cal, USC, UCLA, and Washington, I believe, were all, the McKeever twins. Yeah, Marvin and Marlon McKeever. Anyway, and then it's funny, their sister and it became the swimming coach at Cal, and may still be there today, but she was there as recently as 10, 15 years ago. Anyway, all these teams were put on probation by the NCAA. And what the result of it was USC and UCLA just rallied from it, and Washington rallied from it. And USC Cal went the other way. And Cal decided to downgrade sports and downgrade football and not pay as much attention, not put as much money into it, not glorify it as much. And of course, this morphs into the 1960s where everything was going on in their campus, and they became the de facto staging grounds of American communism, flying Hanoi flags on campus. And meanwhile, USC's winning national championships and just enjoying life. And so that became a huge part of the dynamic of the Cal-Stanford dynamic rivalry, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of them had 68, the other one 86. So brothers kind of interswapping numbers with one another, but they look like pretty big boys for their size in that era. You know what I mean? Jerseys went down past the mid of the forearm back in those days. I can't imagine what that was like in the summer, but I imagine you wish that at least you got a full sleeve during the winter and the cold games in November, December, and maybe even January.
Yeah, I knew, I guess it was Marlon. I believe Marlon was the survivor on it. And I interviewed him and actually met him a couple times at the LA Coliseum. His brother, of course, had died tragically. He was, I think they both were with the Rams, and the other brother was in a car accident, and he lingered for a year or so as a quadriplegic and eventually passed very tragically. But they were tremendous players at USC, and Mount Carmel High, Harper, were they in your league? I haven't heard that name. Were they playing Notre Dame High School? I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah, I knew of the school, but I don't think they were the same classification. No, different league, if you will. We didn't play them, and I don't know many in our league that did. So you look at other teams and their schedules, etc. Real quick, guys, while we were talking about the announcers, don't name four, but give me at least one and maybe two. Let's max it at two. Mount Rushmore of announcers, guys that have made a difference to you, to where you go, what? This guy's not only my favorite, but he is well beyond a national treasure. Mike, start with you.
That's I never thought about that before. It's a great question. Gosh, I mean, I got to put Vince Scully up there. As far as I'm concerned, Jerry Coleman's up there.
Okay.
Well, because I have a personal connection.
Right. That's fine. Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, there's so many great, you look back to your childhood, Kurt Gowdy. I didn't know the man, but I loved him. I thought when you knew the game was special, when Kurt Gowdy did the game. It was without much question. Who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. I don't know if there's really a way to answer that. For the sake of it, I think, you'd have to put maybe Scully. In San Francisco, we had a great announcer by the name of Niners and Giants, Lon Simmons. He was about as good as it gets. I don't know if there's any, there was a guy by the name of Hank Greenwald. He was a storyteller. He wasn't my personal favorite, but it just depends what you like, what type of style you're looking for. This guy Greenwald was a storyteller. He wasn't the most enthusiastic guy in the world, but anyways, just some thoughts on some of the great announcers. But there's so many great ones, and you know what? There's a lot of bad ones who are on the air right now, and I can't believe it. That blows my mind. Travis and I talks about it. I don't really care. I'm going to say this right now. There's a woman who I worked with in San Francisco, and she was. I have to leave some of the details out. I'll get in trouble. But she was a nobody, and she was doing traffic reporting, and she got on the sports station in San Francisco, and somehow she finagled her way doing high school football and like cable in San Francisco, Comcast cable. And because she's a woman, and I'm going to say that, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of great gals, but and then all of a sudden the Pac-12 network comes into play, and she becomes the first woman on the Pac-12 in the history of the Pac-12 to do a college football game. Trust me, guys. So she gets that gig. Then the Warriors have her do an all-female broadcast. The 49ers do the same things. Then she even does the Sharks. And I got to tell you, she was bad. Well, guess where she is today? She's the TV voice of the freaking Philadelphia 76ers. And I'm not even going to say the name or anything else. Everybody can put it together, but it blows my mind. But yet I can't get a sniff with the Philadelphia 76ers or the Golden State Warriors or anybody else, because apparently I'm not good enough, or whatever. I don't fit the narrative. So there, yeah. Do we get a little angry sometimes? I'm a human being. Sure I do.
Well,
Any
yeah.
thoughts?
Well, she's not on your Mount Rushmore, but Steven, who would be on yours? And by the way, there's one guy that we haven't mentioned at all who really changed the way that we listen to games. Howard Cosell. Would he be on anybody's? Okay. Would he be on anybody's Mount Rushmore? But Steven, I'll after I ask you, who's give me one or two on your Mount Rushmore.
Well, I got to put Big Mike McDowd up there, and this is how I meet Mike McDowd. It's around 1990. I'm with a mutual friend named Kevin McCormick. We're out having a good time, and we go into Denny's late at night at about 2, and Mike knew Kevin, and I think Mike knew who I was, but I didn't know who Mike was. And so he sits down and go, who's this guy, and next thing I know, he starts doing Vin Scully imitations. I'm going, holy cow, this guy's doing a Vin Scully imitation at 2:00 in the morning at Denny's. So that's how Mike and I became friends. And then later I wrote a Barry Bonds book, and he was one of the first people to interview me about it back on his station in Santa Rosa, Channel 50, I think it was. Obviously there's Scully. You mentioned Lon Simmons. Now there's another personal friend of mine, or a person. Yeah, he was a friend of mine. Yeah, he was so kind to me when I was with the San Francisco Examiner, and he introduced me to everybody and just made sure I knew everybody. So that you have people who are just gentlemen. Ken Korak is a gentleman. Vin Scully is a gentleman. Bill King is as good an announcer as anybody who ever announced at any level. I don't care what anyone says. He finally went into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Should have been in there a long time ago. And he's even a better basketball and football announcer. Basketball stuff was simply poetic. You can listen to these old tapes of him just going a mile a minute describing Rick Barry and the transition of the Warrior offense in the 1970s, and not missing a beat, not missing one single syllable of a fast-paced game. And football, of course, is a fast-paced game too, and just catching every single iota of the action. Then there's, I always remember Lindsey Nelson. You'd listen on Sundays, and he's going, Purdue was unable to sustain a drive, so Notre Dame takes over after the kick on their own 40-yard line. Clemens back to pass, and that he was wonderful. I remember him as the voice of the New York Mets when they won the World Series in 1969. And I had this fantastic record that my dad bought me, the Miracle Mets. And I would listen to it over and over and had, Lindsey Nelson going, and the New York Mets have won the National League pennant by defeating the Atlanta Braves. And now it's on to Baltimore, and just those kinds of voices. Bob Costas, Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker is more than just a baseball announcer. He is a personality, a Hollywood figure, a comic, a Johnny Carson regular. We've talked about him. Is he my favorite? Boy, he's up there. So
yeah, he got weaved into so many different ways of being national. The light beer from Miller commercial with the greatest lines ever. I must be in the front row, and all these other just fun things, just a bit outside that were able to connect people that had nothing to do with baseball with him. Very briefly, I don't have a 4, but Keith Jackson is definitely on my Mount Rushmore because I don't even have to say his name, and you know exactly who I'm talking with when I go, this 6'4", 275-pounder from Austin, Texas. Just the way he would deliver was amazing. Al Michaels, of course, and I'll throw Enberg in there. Dick Enberg, oh my, he would set a tone of great relief if you're winning, but great tragedy that you were going to, the game was going to slip from your hands just through his voice. I would do cartwheels in terms of, how my emotion by listening to a game or watching one with him. He was with Merlin for several years, and I think Bob Trumpy was with him for a number of years. And Bob wasn't a great announcer, but he was great with Dick Enberg. You know what I mean? They were really good together.
Yeah.
Mike, you were going to say something. Please forgive me. I interrupted you.
Oh, no. It's just I interrupted you. There was nothing better than watching Dick Enberg do Wimbledon. When he did Wimbledon, it was magical. I don't know if you guys – there was nobody better in my opinion. Ted Robinson was a very fine voice for the 49ers. He was in Atlanta, I believe, or with the Twins, was super too, but nobody was better than Dick Enberg doing Wimbledon. When he was on, you knew this tournament was pretty darn special.
Yeah.
I want to throw Tom Kelly's name in there.
Thank you. I had Tom Kelly on my list because of a number of things. He was really, and he was a local radio guy too. He was on KABC, would have a show there. He'd do the Trojans. Go ahead, Stephen. I don't want to take your thunder.
No, and he was another guy I knew very. I had a great Tom Kelly story. 2005, USC beats Notre Dame in one of the greatest games ever played, period. This is the Bush push. The Leinart scores, they win the game. They're undefeated. They're headed towards a national title. Game ends, and shall I say, I have a couple of libations to celebrate the victory. And as I would do on these nights when SC wins big, I start going through, at that time was a Rolodex, and I start calling all my SC friends. Hey, wasn't that a great game? And I'm calling Terry Marks, and I'm calling these people that I went to school with. And so I call Tom Kelly. And his wife, he had a wife, I think her name was Levita or something. She was a very pretty, refined European woman. And she knew me because we'd had dinner together on a couple of occasions. And I knew Tom quite well. And hi, Levita, this is Steve Travers. I just wanted to talk to Tom about that game. She goes, oh, yes, Tom, is Steve Travers on the phone? So all of a sudden, Tom comes on the phone and goes, Steve, how the heck are you? Haven't seen you at Riviera in a long time. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've never played Riviera. I think I've been to Riviera once, but I'll let it slide. So we're talking, and I'm talking to Kelly for a good 10 minutes, and he's actually criticizing Pete Carroll's play calling. We should have beaten them bigger. It's like, gosh darn, aren't you just happy we won the game? So I realized 10 minutes into the conversation, he thinks I'm another guy that he plays golf with at Riviera Country Club in Pacific Palisades or Brentwood or wherever it is. And I never even corrected him. I just let him go because I think he'd had a few cocktails as well. But he was beautiful. I mean, I was on panels with Tom Kelly at USC at Annenberg. I taught a class. I was an adjunct professor and guest panelist on many occasions, and he was on some of these panels, and he would just take it over. He would be sitting there like, he's going to be accepting questions. No. He starts handling the whole master of ceremonies situation because he was at it was at USC, and this is his bailiwick, and you just let him do it. And he had I'll never forget, Kevin McCormick met him at the stands at the Coliseum, and the first thing Kevin says is, "You sound exactly like you do on the radio." He talked just like, it's like he said, "Well, Steve, I'm so glad to see that you're in the press box today." He talked just like it was Davis with the ball. He's got a line of guys in front of him. It's at the 30, the 35. Nobody is going to touch him. And nobody is going to stop Steve Travers getting into the press box to have a salami sandwich today. He just talked like that on the phone, wherever you were with him. He was an Irish wit in a character.
Yeah, and quite a market there. Yep, there he is. Yep,
handsome dude. A dapper fellow. He was magnificent.
Yep, and had a great recollection, of history and big games from the past that he would throw in during today's broadcast. Things like that I thought he would tie in. So he did his homework. You obviously, Mike, have mentioned how important it is to do your homework. We were going to talk about some other things, but let's continue with the announcing. Are you always looking for something original or different? Do you ask different questions when you get the chance to talk to athletes, kind of getting tell me a little bit more about, what your walk is to class and, just little things that you might be able to use in a broadcast.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm pretty blessed. I get to bring a very diverse background to the broadcast booth. I was a TV news reporter in San Francisco. I did weather, traffic. I was a feature reporter. I did live stuff on television 5 days a week. I produced it all. I got to interview people like, and if you'll allow me to tell you this story before we're done, one of the greatest interviews I've ever had, not an interview, excuse me, it was a conversation, is with, in my opinion, you talk about the Mount Rushmore of America, the great cartoonist Charles Schulz.
Oh, wow.
I'd be happy to tell you more about that story. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. It's one of those pinch me moments in life. Interviewing guys like Huey Lewis. Why am I sharing this? Getting to know Guy Fieri, the famous chef I actually helped him get his career going before. Now he's like a mega millionaire on Food Network. I'm using this for an example because I get to bring all these elements into the sports world. So I'm not a one-trick pony. So I like to bring different elements, different stories, cultural events, blend it all together and just kind of be relevant with people and keep it real, as you like to say. And so I think that, you certainly try to find cliches or keywords or a buzzword or, the only thing that comes to mind is Joe Starkey in San Francisco had this, "Oh, what a bonanza." That's his little catch thing. So you always try to find something catchy and clever and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, I hope that paints the pictures. But yeah, we all try to find something, that's clever and catchy. When I was on TV, I used to use this word, fun oh plenty. It was oh plenty. When I'm describing something, oh, this is, this food is great, fabulous oh plenty. Anyways, people caught on to that. So you like to use that word oh plenty, and an Irish phrase. And I don't know how, I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but I'm just going on and on. By the way, I want to give a quick shout out to the Huntsville, Alabama Police Department. I was in Huntsville, Alabama a few years ago. Steve knows about this trip. And I see now that 6 of their officers, including the chief, are all being indicted, and the Huntsville Police Department is being disbanded. Okay, good for them. It was a funky little town in the middle of nowhere, about an hour and 15 minutes away from Birmingham, Alabama. I thought it was fascinating for me. So I just got this breaking news across the wire here. So I hope law and order comes back to good old Huntsville, Alabama.
Well, knowing that you've got news, weather, and sports, you do all of them. You just gave a lineup. Hey, real quick, we got about 3 or 4 minutes. Can you do the Charles Schultz story in that time? I know that
Sure. So I was working at television station KFDY 50 in Santa Rosa, the San Francisco Bay Area market, and so each year I was a live morning feature reporter, and I would start out as a weatherman because I wanted to get into TV. Like, hey, we're starting a new morning show. We need a weather guy. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So through the years, they would put me out in the field, and I would get to do different, whether it's breaking news or whatever. But for about 3-4 years in a row, Charles Schultz would do a Christmas on ice show, a holiday show, a Christmas show, because he owns an ice rink in Santa Rosa, California. He's from Minnesota. He's a great skater. He loves hockey. He actually runs the Charles Schultz Senior World Championships, where teams from all over the world, 50 or 45 and all the way up to 90, come to play for his tournament. So at his Christmas show, I would skate with the stars of the show on ice. One guy's name is Richard Dwyer. He's a U.S. U.S. national champion, phenomenal professional skater. I'd skate with him. The gals would come out with the high legs and do the kick-in. Beautiful women on skates. Snoopy would skate around and do backflips. So we're taking a break during the show. We go back to the news desk, and I'm sitting there ringside, kind of by myself across the ice from our camera. And this guy kind of comes near me. I'm all, oh, good morning. How are you? Oh, how are you? Yes. I know exactly who he is. He's like, oh, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for promoting our show. I said, well, he goes, what's your name? And I'm all, Michael McDowd. Yes, Mr. Schultz, nice to meet you. I'm a big fan of your ice rink. I've been coming here since I was a kid. We're so happy to provide any type of, any type of good news to help you promote your ice show, because it's fabulous. Anyways, so we're starting to talk a little bit. I'm like, geez, he's talking to me. And the next thing I know, he says, hey, would you like to join me for a hot chocolate at my special reserve table? So Charles Schultz is asking me, would you like to join me for a hot chocolate at my special reserve table? I'm sitting there going, let me think about that. Absolutely. It was an honor. So after the show is done, I go, I meet Mr. Schultz at his, he's got an ice rink. He's got a cafe. Inside the cafe is a special table reserved just for him. So I'm sitting down with Charles Schultz, and Mr. Schultz is talking to me, asking me questions about myself, my family, and he was the most humble man you could possibly imagine, super uber wealthy. But just talk about a man who really, first of all, it caught me by surprise to really bestow an honor upon me to have a conversation with him. And it was so humbling for me that I actually, during the conversation, as he's talking, I said, is this really happening? To me, it's like talking to Babe Ruth. They're close to it. Because everybody loves Snoopy. Everybody loves Charles, the Peanuts. So anyways, he's talking to me about asking me questions about my family, myself, my job. And I'm like, I'm sitting there to myself. I'm all, Mr. Schultz, Sparky, that was his nickname, Sparky. who cares about me? Let's talk about you and your great career and your family. And it was one of those, like I said, it was one of those pinch me moments in life, very humbling. And again, his kindness, his authenticity, and his genuineness blew my mind. And it just, God bless his soul. It's one of the great moments in my career. Another great moment in my career is interviewing Huey Lewis. I got to sing with Huey Lewis's guitarist. My buddy Guy Fieri, the chef, got to know him a little bit. So those are my pinch me moments. And it's a story I like to tell because Charles Schultz did not have to do that. So, anyways, I hope I brought it home for you. But what a wonderful human being.
Yeah, and a guy that really changed the comic book world, so to speak, in the Sunday papers and everything that was a part of it. You rooted for Charlie Brown when Lucy took the ball away, and there's nothing greater than Snoopy flying the Red Baron, and just my kids don't know that. You guys, it's a different world, and they don't know much about it, but. A Snoopy shirt, if I saw one today, I'd probably ask, where did you get it? And how do I get one? You know what I mean? If I watched anybody that was going down the street with one. I know you've got a hard stop here, Mike, so we want to
send you one.
respectful
I'll
of that.
send you one. What size do you wear?
I'm an
What
XL,
size do
my
you wear?
friend. I'm an XL.
Okay, we'll make sure we get you one from Charles Schultz's ice rink and gift store. He's got a museum up there. And like I said, man, it's and what another thing, just talking about the great Charles Schultz. Do you remember his great messages that he would often put in his comic strips, biblical at times? Just
Yes.
really good, clean, wholesome messages. That's missing today.
Yeah. I never rooted for Lucy. I always felt sorry for Charlie Brown. But now that I'm older, I'm going, okay, I can see why she's doing that. I can see her wanting to pull the ball from that guy, and doing whatever. Woodstock obviously was a later character. Schroeder, Lucy loves you, my friend. Go take her out on it. Go to a movie. Go do something with her. All these interesting characters. Peppermint Patty, of course. Marcy with the glasses. You never saw her eyes. I'm dating myself, aren't I? Stephen, Mike needs to leave, so we'll probably end the show right now. Give me some final thoughts. Would you change anyone in your Mount Rushmore? And let me know who that would be, so that we can, a great conversation today about different announcers and people who kind of changed the way that we love sports.
Well, I think all the names that I could think of have been mentioned either by me or you, Harper, or you, Mike. But you were talking to Mike earlier, and he was talking about his approach, and I can tell you that I've seen it. Mike has a way about him, and when he talks to young people, he connects to them. It doesn't matter if they're 18, 19, 20 years old. He talks to them in a way that they become friends. So when he's doing these interviews with these young football players or young athletes, he becomes their friend, and he gets into their personal lives and not just the hits, runs, and errors. And I think that's what and that comes through when he's doing the games, because he'll have a snippet from. And the other thing, he talked about Starkey. I've been with Mike, and when the opportunity comes, like it's a particularly haphazard situation on the field, he'll throw in, and the band is on the field, or what a bonanza. He will throw those Starkeyisms in there.
Yeah, amazing things that you pick up, and sometimes you hear it once, sometimes you hear it every week. Mike, thank you for being a guest on the show. Final thoughts from you.
Well, I want to beg, claw, and scratch to get back here, because honestly, I feel like we've been talking about 5 minutes. So if you guys want to do like a 2-hour show, 3-hour show, count me in, because we can just sit here and talk about anything and everything. I mean, you got to love the fact that I gave you breaking news from the Hanceville, Alabama Police Department, who's going to be gone now. Now the sheriffs are going to step in. So listen, I just want to say I'm humbled to be on this great show in Atlanta, Georgia. Harper, you're fabulous. You're a gifted broadcaster. I know you're an incredible football player, but just a great human being. Steve Travers, Ditto. I mean, one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. You guys are both men of God. Yeah, I said that on a radio show. Okay, crucify me. Just blessed to be with you both. Thank you so much. Like I said, I could sit here for another couple of hours and just shoot the you know what with you.
Yeah, well,
Thank
we'll
you.
have to redo it again. And thank you to Wade Turner for popping in and kind of correcting our mistakes. We had a couple of times. He did mention Larry Munson. He had
Yes.
John Ward, the Tennessee announcer. So thank you very much, Wade, for your contribution to the show and for making sure that we get it right. So appreciate that. It's been an interesting episode. We were going to talk about some things like the hockey, the All-Star tournament with America and Canada taking the ice tonight. A little bit of NBA action. It's spring training. We'll have to get that next week, Stephen. We'll talk about baseball in a everybody has hope and there's reason to believe way. But for today, we ended up just going off on a side tangent and talked about some of the great announcers who've affected our lives and our ability to love sports in a very special way. So for Steven Travers, our special guest, Mike McDowd, who's been with us here today as a host, really, you were part of it. And for Logan Landers, thanks for the great job you did, Logan, as our producer and engineer. I'm Harper Lebel saying thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football. This has been Take 5 with Steven Travers. We appreciate it. Have a great and fantastic day, everybody.